something stalks the humid nights of Puerto Rico. The legend of the Chupacabra is more than a campfire story. Its origins are buried deep within the island's folklore, a mystery that has terrified and fascinated for decades. But what if this creature is not merely a monster of flesh and blood? What if the true secret lies hidden within the island's spiritual undercurrents? By the end of this, you will see this legend not as a simple cryptid hunt, but as a key to understanding how fear can manifest into something almost real. We will explore why the descriptions of this beast are so inconsistent, and what its vampiric nature might symbolize on a far deeper level. What kind of truth do you think lies behind the stories we tell ourselves to explain the dark? The humid summer of 1995 in Canavanas was shattered by a series of bizarre and brutal livestock deaths. 8 sheep were found completely drained of blood, with 3 strange puncture wounds on each of their chests. There was no panic, no frenzy, just a chilling, surgical precision to the killings that left the entire community unsettled. But the abstract fear of an unknown predator became terrifyingly real when a local woman named Madeline Tolentino stepped forward. She reported a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It stood upright on powerful hind legs, its skin a hairless, ashen gray, like that of a reptile. She described hypnotic, oversized red eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural light, and a row of sharp, quill-like spines running down the curve of its back. This was not a stray dog or a mangy coyote. This was something entirely new, a thing that seemed to have crawled straight out of a nightmare. Her detailed account, repeated across the island, provided a face for the fear. The name Chupacabra, which literally means goat sucker, was born, and it spread like wildfire. Local newspapers and sensational television reports seized upon the story, amplifying every whispered rumor and every new sighting. This was not just a monster hunt. It was the birth of a modern legend, a perfect storm where genuine community anxiety collided with the explosive power of media, creating a creature that was instantly recognizable and utterly terrifying. Why did this specific description capture the island's imagination so completely? Perhaps because it gave a tangible, monstrous form to the intangible fears of a community, a physical enemy to blame for the unexplainable. Madeline Tolentino's account was not an isolated one. Across Puerto Rico, others came forward with eerily similar stories. They described the same piercing red eyes, the same leathery gray skin, and the same unsettling bipedal gait. The consistency was startling, lending an air of undeniable credibility to the phenomenon. Yet, when we look closer at these eyewitness accounts, a fascinating pattern emerges, one rooted not in biology, but in the intricate workings of the human mind. In a climate of palpable fear, the simple act of suggestion becomes incredibly powerful. If your neighbor is certain they saw a monster with spines on its back, and then you hear a rustle in the bushes on a dark night, your mind is already primed to see those very same spines. This is not deception. It is a fundamental feature of human perception, a process called pareidolia, where our brains try to make sense of the ambiguous by fitting it into a known pattern. We see faces in clouds or a man in the moon, and in the dim shadows of a Puerto Rican farm, a strange but natural animal, perhaps a mangy dog or a possum, could be transformed into the creature everyone was talking about. This effect is magnified within a close-knit community. Shared anxiety can create a kind of psychological echo chamber, a feedback loop where individual fears amplify each other into a collective certainty. This is often labeled as mass hysteria, but that term can be misleading. It is less about chaos and more about a shared need for an explanation. When livestock are found dead under mysterious circumstances, the unknown is terrifying. A tangible monster, however frightening, is a simpler, more manageable enemy than a random, invisible disease or an unexplained natural phenomenon. The Chupacabra provided a focal point, a name and a form for that deep-seated fear. It gave people a story to tell, a way to make sense of the senseless. So, were all these people lying? Almost certainly not. They were likely reporting what they genuinely believed they saw, their perceptions subtly and powerfully reshaped by the stories circulating around them. The real monster was not necessarily lurking in the jungle. It was taking shape in the space between rumor and belief, a collective creation born from the very human need to put a face on our fears. If our own minds can so easily conspire to manifest something this detailed and this terrifying from the shadows, what does that say about the other monsters we think we see in the dark? But what about the physical proof left behind? The evidence seemed at first glance to be undeniable. Farmers would find their animals cold and lifeless, marked by those 3 precise puncture wounds on the neck or chest, and the bodies appeared completely drained of blood. This specific detail became a cornerstone of the legend, a sign of the creature's vampiric nature. Yet, when veterinarians and biologists examined these cases, a different, more grounded story emerged. The bodies were rarely, if ever, completely devoid of blood. An animal carcass left in the heat will often undergo a natural process where blood pools at the lowest points due to gravity, and the surrounding tissues can absorb much of the fluid, creating the illusion of a bloodless kill. As for the famous triple puncture, the arrangement is a perfect match for the canine teeth of a common predator. An animal like a dog or a coyote will often bite down, its upper and lower teeth creating wounds, and if it shifts its grip, it can leave a third mark, creating that telltale triangular pattern. It was not the surgical signature of a mythical beast, but the messy work of a natural hunter. On a few dramatic occasions, the hunt seemed to be over. Strange carcasses were presented to the public as the captured chupacabra. These were often gruesome finds, hairless and twisted, looking nothing like a normal animal. The most famous of these were the so-called Elmendorf beast in Texas and other similar creatures found across the Americas. Each time, the hope was that science would confirm the monster's existence. And each time, genetic testing delivered the same sobering result. These were not unknown creatures. They were almost always coyotes or dogs suffering from a severe case of mange, a parasitic skin disease that causes horrific hair loss, skin thickening, and a drastic change in appearance. A healthy, furry coyote looks familiar. A mangy, emaciated one, with its skin stretched taut over its skeleton, can look truly alien. These animals are weak, desperate, and often behave erratically, which could explain unusual attacks on livestock. So the physical evidence, when subjected to scrutiny, consistently pointed away from a singular monster and toward a combination of known biology, misunderstood natural processes, and the tragic plight of diseased local wildlife. The real mystery was not what supernatural creature was responsible, but how our desire to believe could transform a sick animal into a legendary beast. If the body of the monster, when finally found, always turns out to be something ordinary, then where does the legend truly live? The very name Chupacabra gives us a profound clue. Goat sucker on the surface describes a literal action, but in esoteric traditions, names carry immense power, and the act of sucking is rarely just about physical substance. What if the goat, a resilient and vital creature, represents the life force of the land and its people? The creature, then, is not merely drinking blood. It is consuming energy. This idea of a parasitic entity feeding on vitality is a cornerstone of many occult teachings. It is the concept of the energy vampire, a being or force that sustains itself by draining the psychic and emotional resources of others. These are not monsters of flesh and blood, but astral parasites, thought to attach themselves to individuals or even entire communities, feeding on fear, anxiety, and distress. Now, consider the atmosphere in Puerto Rico during the peak of the sightings. A community was gripped by a shared, tangible fear. This collective anxiety creates a powerful, and often negative, psychic energy. According to some esoteric beliefs, that very energy can act as a summoning beacon. It can give form and substance to a thought form, a psychic entity created and sustained by the focused belief and emotion of a group. The chupacabra, in this light, becomes less a biological anomaly and more a manifested tulpa, a creature born from the collective psyche. It is a symbol made flesh, or at least, made real in the perception of those who believe. The creature's vampiric nature completes a disturbing cycle. It is born from fear, and its alleged actions create more fear. thereby strengthening its own legend and its perceived presence. It feeds on the very terror it inspires, so when we hear stories of a beast that sucks life from livestock, we might also be hearing a metaphorical truth. The real parasite was not in the bushes, but the intangible drain of a community's peace and sense of security. The legend itself was the true goat sucker, and its nourishment was our belief. If a collective fear can give birth to such a persistent and terrifying icon, what other invisible forces might we be feeding with our own anxieties? The timing of the Chupacabra's arrival was far from a coincidence. To understand why this legend took such a powerful hold, we must look at the Puerto Rico of the mid-1990s. The island was navigating a period of intense economic transformation and political uncertainty. Its unique status as a United States Commonwealth created a complex identity, caught between self-governance and a distant federal authority. During this era, policies like the phase-out of Section 936 of the Federal Tax Code, which had offered significant incentives for American corporations, led to widespread anxiety about jobs and economic stability. This was not an abstract fear. It was a palpable tension in communities, a worry about the future that touched every family. When a society faces such large, systemic pressures that feel utterly beyond its control, the human psyche often seeks a more tangible outlet for that fear. It is easier to confront a monster in the backyard than to grapple with the invisible forces of global economics and political ambiguity. The Chupacabra became that perfect vessel. It was a physical enemy that could be hunted, a clear and simple problem in a world of complex, unsolvable ones. This process is a recurring theme throughout global folklore. From the European werewolf, a manifestation of rural fears of the wilderness and predatory animals, to the Japanese kappa, often seen as an explanation for drownings and other water-related tragedies, mythical beings frequently emerge to embody the specific anxieties of their time and place. For Puerto Rico, the Chupacabra was not just a beast. It was a scapegoat, a symbolic container for the collective stress over a shifting cultural identity and an uncertain economic future. The creature did not just suck the blood from goats. It seemed to suck the vitality from the land itself, mirroring a deep-seated fear that outside forces were draining the island's resources and spirit. The monster in the cane fields was, in a very real sense, a monster born from a fractured dream. Its legend gave a name and a face to the haunting feeling that control was slipping away, that something was preying upon the community from the shadows. When the true threats are too vast and complicated to fight, does it not make a strange kind of sense to create a smaller, more manageable monster we can all fear together? This local panic was a spark, but it was the media that poured gasoline on the flame. In Puerto Rico, Spanish-language news programs and sensational talk shows seized upon the Chupacabra story with gripping urgency. Every new sighting, no matter how unverified, became a major headline. Dramatic reenactments and blurry photographs filled television screens, imprinting Madeline Tolentino's specific description of the creature into the public consciousness. The media did not just report the story, they actively shaped it, turning a series of disturbing livestock deaths into a full-blown monster hunt. This created a powerful and self-sustaining feedback loop. The more the media reported on the Chupacabra, the more people looked for it. And the more people looked, the more sightings were reported, which in turn gave the media even more material to broadcast. The relentless repetition of the same terrifying image did not just inform the public, it effectively programmed them. The monster was being assembled, piece by piece, not in the jungle, but on the television screen. Then, the legend broke through to a global audience. American television shows like Unsolved Mysteries brought the tale of the goat sucker into living rooms across the United States and beyond. These programs presented the story with their signature blend of mystery and suspense, framing it as a genuine paranormal enigma. For viewers who had never been to Puerto Rico, this was not a local superstition. It was evidence of a hidden world, a real monster lurking just out of sight. The Chupacabra was no longer a Puerto Rican phenomenon. It was a global cryptid, a star in the emerging world of paranormal entertainment. This sensationalist storytelling, while compelling, often stripped the legend of its cultural and psychological context. The creature became a simple monster, divorced from the complex social anxieties that had given it birth. The media did not discover the Chupacabra. In a very real sense, they created it, by providing the narrative blueprint that thousands of minds would then use to populate their own shadows. If a story is told often enough and with enough conviction, does it eventually step out of the screen and into our reality? For decades, the hunt for the Chupacabra has been framed as a cryptozoological puzzle. This field, dedicated to the search for hidden animals like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, operates on the premise that the creature is a biological entity, an undiscovered species waiting to be found by science. Proponents scour the wilderness for bones, tracks, or a body, hoping for that one piece of irrefutable physical evidence, yet this approach consistently hits a wall. The creatures that are found and tested are always identified as known animals, and the physical evidence, like the puncture wounds, always has a mundane explanation. The cryptozoological lens, while compelling, may be asking the wrong question entirely. It assumes the monster is made of matter, something that can be trapped and dissected. But what if the Chupacabra is made of something else, something far less tangible? From an esoteric perspective, this creature fits the description of a tulpa, a concept from Tibetan mysticism. A tulpa is a thought form, a being that is not born but conjured into a kind of existence through intense, focused belief and visualization. It begins as a mere idea, but through the sustained power of collective consciousness, it is believed to gain a form of autonomy and even a semi-physical presence in our world. This is not about finding a new animal. It is about understanding how a shared idea can become a self-sustaining entity. The people of Puerto Rico were not just reporting a monster, they were, in a very real sense, participating in its creation. Every whispered story, every fearful glance into the dark, every sensational news report was another thread woven into its form. The collective fear and anxiety of an entire community became the raw material from which the Chupacabra was built. This explains why it seems to flicker in and out of solid existence. It is not a stable biological creature, but a psychic one, its presence waxing and waning with the intensity of the belief that fuels it. When the fear was at its peak, the sightings were vivid and widespread. As the panic subsided, the creature retreated back into the shadows from which it was summoned. The Chupacabra does not need to be found by science because it was not created by nature. It was born from a powerful, collective need for an explanation, a vessel for fear that grew strong enough to stare back at its creators from the darkness. If our focused belief can give a monster its form, what else in our world might we be bringing to life without even realizing it? The creature's bizarre appearance inevitably sparked theories far beyond earthly biology. With its leathery gray skin and oversized hypnotic eyes, the Chupacabra did not look like a beast from any known jungle. It looked, to many, like it had crawled straight out of a UFO. This gave rise to one of the most persistent theories, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. In this narrative, the Chupacabra is not a natural animal at all, but an alien creature, perhaps a lost pet or a biological experiment abandoned here by visitors from another world. Its vampiric feeding is reinterpreted not as predation, but as a form of sustenance collection for an organism not of this earth. Why has this specific idea taken such a powerful hold? The answer is woven into the very landscape of Puerto Rico itself. The island has long been a hotspot for UFO sightings, with countless reports of strange lights and unexplained craft, particularly in and around the dense, mist-shrouded peaks of the Yunque rainforest. This region is often whispered about in ufology circles as a potential base or a portal for otherworldly visitors. When a community is already looking to the skies with a sense of wonder and unease, it becomes a small, logical step to connect a mysterious ground-based monster to the mysteries hovering above. The Chupacabra, then, fits perfectly into a pre-existing narrative of cosmic intervention. It provides a tangible, biological piece of the UFO puzzle. If strange ships are flying overhead, is it so hard to believe they might have left something behind? This theory transforms the creature from a frightening predator into a symbol of something even larger, a piece of evidence in a grand cosmic mystery. It is a way to make sense of the unknown by connecting it to an even greater unknown, one that offers a seemingly more advanced, if equally terrifying, explanation. The idea of an alien experiment run amok is, in a strange way, more comforting than the thought of a monster born from our own collective fear. It places the origin of our terror out among the stars, far beyond our control, absolving us of the responsibility for its creation. So the next time you hear a story about the goat sucker, ask yourself this: is it easier to believe in a monster from the stars, or in the unsettling power of our own minds to manifest the things we fear most into a form we can almost touch? Deep within Yunque, the air itself feels different. This ancient rainforest, with its perpetually misty peaks and dense, emerald canopy, is far more than a national park. It is a living, breathing entity, a place where the line between the physical world and something far stranger seems to blur into nothing. Long before it was associated with the Chupacabra, Yunque was sacred ground to the indigenous Taino people, who revered it as the dwelling place of Yakahu, their supreme deity. They understood this was not just a collection of trees, but a spiritual epicenter, a place of immense power. In esoteric traditions, such locations are known as thin places. A thin place is not a literal doorway you can walk through. It is a location where the energetic barrier separating our consensus reality from other realms of existence is believed to be at its most fragile and permeable. Think of it like a wall between two rooms, but in one specific spot, the plaster has worn so thin you can hear whispers from the other side, and sometimes you might even catch a glimpse of something moving. This concept provides a powerful alternative framework for understanding the Chupacabra. If this creature is not a biological being or a simple thought form, could it be an interdimensional traveler? Its sudden appearances and equally sudden vanishings, its bizarre physiology that seems to defy known evolution, and its connection to a location steeped in mystical energy all point to this possibility. In a thin place, the rules of our reality are not as rigid. Beings that normally exist on a different vibrational frequency, in a dimension layered over our own, might occasionally bleed through the veil. The Chupacabra, then, is not coming from a spaceship or from the depths of the jungle alone. It might be stepping through a temporary rift, a cosmic weak spot in the fabric of spacetime, with Yunque acting as the primary gateway. Its vampiric nature could even be reinterpreted. Perhaps it is not sucking blood for nourishment in the way we understand, but harvesting a specific type of bioenergy or life force that is abundant in our dimension. Energy it requires to sustain its form or to power its return journey. The creature's terrifying visits are not a hunt in the traditional sense, but a form of interdimensional foraging. So when witnesses describe the Chupacabra's alien appearance and its unnerving, almost glitchy movements, could they be perceiving a being that is not entirely rendered in our reality, one whose very existence here is temporary and unstable? The legend of the goat sucker may be our way of rationalizing a far more complex and profound phenomenon, one that plays out in the misty, sacred silence of an ancient forest where the walls between worlds are whisper-thin. Every culture's monsters whisper with the voices of their ancestors. To truly understand the Chupacabra, we must listen for its echo in the older stories of the island, tales that long predate the panic of 1995. Look to the folklore of Central America, and you will find the Cadijo, a spectral dog that roams the night. It often appears in pairs, one white and one black, representing protection in peril. This creature is not a simple beast. It is a complex omen, a manifestation of the dual nature of the road and the traveler's journey into the unknown. The Chupacabra, with its own ambiguous nature, fits into this archetypal role of the mysterious night stalker. But the roots go even deeper, into the very soil of Puerto Rico and the beliefs of the Taino people. They spoke of spirits known as maboyas, shadowy beings associated with caves and the night, often blamed for misfortunes and illness. These were not creatures you could fight with a weapon. They were manifestations of the dark, unpredictable forces of the world. The Chupacabra is a modern maboya. It has evolved from a formless spirit of misfortune into a tangible monster that preys on livestock, reflecting a society whose fears have shifted from the purely spiritual to the socio-economic. Our ancestors feared the capricious gods and the spirits of the forest. We fear the loss of our cultural identity and the unsettling pace of scientific change. The Chupacabra is the perfect folkloric vessel for these contemporary anxieties. It is not a monster from a primordial past, but a creature born of a very modern dissonance, where ancient traditions collide with a globalized, technologically driven world. Its vampirism mirrors a fear that our own vitality, our unique culture, is being slowly drained away by outside influences. Its bizarre, almost alien appearance speaks to a deep unease with genetic engineering and science we cannot fully control. The legend is a living thing, and it has shape-shifted to feed on our newest fears, just as its predecessors fed on the old ones. The monster in the cane field is not new. It is simply the oldest of our fears, wearing a new and terrifying mask. A government cover-up provides a chillingly logical explanation for a monster that defies biology. The theory suggests the Chupacabra is no cryptid, but a failed experiment, a genetic hybrid created in a secret laboratory hidden somewhere on the island. This narrative paints a picture of a U.S. military or corporate biotech program that went horribly wrong, allowing a manufactured creature to escape into the wild. The logic, for its proponents, is compelling. It explains the creature's alien appearance, a patchwork of features that don't fit any known evolutionary path. It explains the strange, surgical nature of the attacks, as if the creature was designed for a specific, horrifying purpose. And most importantly, it provides a human, albeit shadowy, architect for the terror. The monster is not a random act of nature, but a deliberate creation, and its existence points to a conspiracy of silence from those in power. But how plausible is this really? While genetic engineering was advancing rapidly in the 1990s, the technology to create a viable, reproducing hybrid of such bizarre characteristics remains in the realm of science fiction. Furthermore, no credible evidence of such a facility or program has ever been uncovered. The power of this theory, therefore, lies not in its scientific merit, but in its profound psychological resonance. For a place with Puerto Rico's complex colonial history and political status, the idea of a secretive outside power conducting dangerous experiments on the island feels less like a fantasy and more like a metaphor for lived experience. The United States government is a distant, often inscrutable authority. Policies enacted far away in Washington can have immediate and dramatic effects on the daily lives of people on the island. This dynamic can foster a deep-seated distrust, a suspicion that decisions are being made without local consent, and that the island and its people are sometimes treated as a testing ground. The Chupacabra, in this context, transforms into a powerful symbol. It becomes the literal, physical manifestation of that fear, a biological weapon of sorts, unleashed by an uncaring power. The creature does not just suck the blood of goats, it sucks the sovereignty, the security, and the peace of mind from the land, embodying the anxiety that outside forces are literally draining the life from the community. This conspiracy narrative is not just about a monster. It is a way of giving a tangible, huntable form to the abstract and deeply unsettling feeling of political powerlessness. When you cannot vote for the presidents who control your destiny, and when your economic stability can be altered by a congressional vote you had no say in, is it any wonder that the monster in the dark is imagined wearing the face of its creators? That vampiric hunger for blood is the most literal, and perhaps least interesting, part of the entire legend. When we shift our gaze from the physical to the esoteric, the Chupacabra transforms from a mere predator into a profound symbol. In occult traditions, the vampire is rarely about the simple consumption of blood. It is an archetype of parasitic energy, a being that sustains its own existence by draining the vital life force, the very essence, from its victims. This life force is known by many names: prana, chi, or the astral light. It is the invisible energy that animates all living things, the spiritual electricity that powers our will, our joy, and our sense of connection. An attack by an energy vampire does not leave a physical corpse. It leaves a person or a place feeling hollow, exhausted, and spiritually gray. Now, apply this lens to the Chupacabra phenomenon. The creature's attacks were never just on individual animals. They were strikes against the stability and spirit of entire communities. Each dead goat or sheep was not merely a financial loss. It was an event that injected a fresh dose of fear and anxiety into the collective psyche of the town. The true sustenance for this entity was not the blood in the veins of the livestock, but the terror that now flowed through the veins of the community. Imagine the atmosphere in a village after a reported attack. Conversations would halt when you walked into a room. Curfews would be imposed. People would look at their neighbors with suspicion, and every strange sound in the night would send a jolt of adrenaline through their bodies. This constant state of high alert, this pervasive, low-grade fear, is a massive drain on a group's spiritual and emotional resources. It consumes the energy that would normally go into celebration, into creativity, into building a future. The community becomes spiritually anemic, its vitality slowly siphoned away not by a single monster, but by the very atmosphere of dread that the monster creates. The Chupacabra, in this symbolic reading, becomes a perfect representation of collective trauma. Trauma, by its nature, is a vampiric force. It locks a person or a people in a past moment of horror, forcing them to endlessly relive it, thereby draining their capacity to live fully in the present. For Puerto Rico, a place with a complex history of colonialism and natural disasters, the Chupacabra legend provided a new, focused vessel for this ancient pain. It gave a name and a form to the lingering feeling of being preyed upon, of having your life force slowly drained by forces beyond your control. The creature did not just suck blood. It symbolized the sucking sound of hope fading, of resilience being tested to its limit. So the next time you hear a story about the goat sucker, ask yourself a different question. What is really being drained? Is it the blood of a farm animal, or is it the spiritual vitality of a people, leaving behind a community that feels just as bloodless and cold as the victims it discovered in the morning light? The patterns left behind were what truly unnerved investigators. These were not the chaotic feeding grounds of a wild predator, but scenes of almost ritualistic precision. The 3 puncture wounds consistently formed a perfect triangle, a shape laden with symbolic meaning in esoteric traditions. Each animal was found completely drained, with no signs of a struggle or tracks leading away, as if the attacker had simply vanished into the night air. This eerie orderliness sparked a chilling alternative theory, one that moves the blame from a monster to human hands. What if the Chupacabra was never a creature at all, but a deliberate smokescreen? The legend provides the perfect cover for clandestine activities, allowing practitioners of dark folk magic or syncretic religions to conduct animal sacrifices under the guise of a monster attack. In traditions like Palo Mayam or Brujeria, animal sacrifice is a potent ritual act, a way to offer energy to spirits or to seal a powerful intention. The blood is considered the life force, the ultimate offering. A goat found in a field, drained of blood with 3 precise wounds, fits the profile of such a ritual far more closely than it does the messy work of a biological predator. The legend of the Chupacabra offers these practitioners a form of supernatural plausible deniability. If the community and the media are all looking for a mythical beast, they are not looking for a person. The fear of the monster effectively hides the human ritual in plain sight, allowing it to continue without the scrutiny that would normally follow a series of gruesome animal killings. This theory forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. The terror was not caused by an unknown beast, but was a calculated byproduct of a hidden, human need for power. The real horror may not lurk in the jungle, but in the quiet determination of those who would use our deepest fears as a shield for their own practices. When we chase a monster through the cane fields, are we merely running from the darker potential of the person standing next to us, Its physical description is its greatest mystery and its most telling clue. One person swears they saw a bipedal monster, standing like a man with the powerful legs of a kangaroo, covered in leathery gray skin and a row of sharp spines. Another is just as certain they encountered a hairless, four-legged beast, more like a sickly dog or a wild coyote, but with an unnerving alien gaze. These are not minor differences. They are radical, fundamental disagreements about the creature's very anatomy. From a purely biological standpoint, this makes no sense. A species has a fixed form, a consistent blueprint, but from an occult perspective, this inconsistency is the most compelling evidence of all. It points to a being that is not bound by the laws of physical matter. In the realm of the astral, forms are not fixed. They are fluid, shaped by consciousness itself. An astral entity is a thing of energy and thought, and when it presses against the fabric of our reality, it has no single, true shape. Instead, it acts like a mirror, reflecting back the expectations and the deepest fears of the person perceiving it. Think of it like a dream. In a dream, a figure of authority might appear as a towering giant to one person, and as a whispering shadow to another. The essence is the same, but the form is sculpted by the dreamer's own psyche. The Chupacabra operates on a similar principle. For a witness steeped in science fiction and UFO lore, the entity might manifest the classic gray alien features, the large black eyes and hairless skin, because that is the vocabulary of cosmic terror their mind understands. For a farmer whose life is tied to the land and its natural predators, the same energetic presence might be interpreted through the lens of a diseased canine, a familiar threat twisted into something monstrous. This is why the creature seems to flicker between a reptilian humanoid and a hairless coyote. It is not shape-shifting in a deliberate way. It is simply being perceived through different filters of human fear. The creature itself may be a singular, non-physical intelligence, but the monster we see is a collaborative creation, a blend of its raw, predatory intent and the unique imagery of our own personal nightmares. So when two people see a different monster in the same place, they might both be right. They are not describing a biological animal. They are reporting on the contents of their own souls. What form would the Chupacabra take if it were staring back at you? The legend refused to be contained by the island's shores. As news reports and television specials broadcast the terrifying image of the red-eyed beast, a strange phenomenon began to occur. Sightings of the Chupacabra started popping up thousands of miles away, first throughout Latin America, and then with explosive frequency in the southern United States, particularly in Texas and northern Mexico. Yet something curious happened during this migration. The creature began to change. The bipedal, reptilian horror described in Puerto Rico was rarely seen. Instead, people were encountering something different, something that perfectly mirrored the local landscape of fear. In the scrublands of Texas, ranchers began finding bizarre carcasses, hairless and twisted, often blamed for the deaths of chickens and small livestock. These creatures were almost always identified by biologists as coyotes or dogs suffering from severe mange. But to a community now primed by the Chupacabra legend, this sickly, familiar animal was instantly transformed into the mythical goat sucker. This was not a failure of observation, but a demonstration of the legend's incredible adaptability. The Chupacabra had evolved from a specific monster into a meme-like entity, a blank screen onto which any unexplained animal death or strange creature could be projected. Its core identity, the blood-drinking predator, remained constant, but its physical form was fluid, shape-shifting to fit the local fauna and the specific anxieties of each new culture it infected. In Puerto Rico, the monster reflected a collective, societal fear. In Texas, it became a more personal terror, a grotesque intruder threatening the livelihood of individual ranchers. The creature's journey reveals a fundamental truth about how folklore operates. A powerful story is a living thing, and to survive, it must find a new host and a new reason to be feared. The Chupacabra was no longer just Puerto Rico's monster. It had become a versatile modern myth, proving that the hunger for such a legend was far more widespread than anyone could have imagined. What does it say about us that we are so willing to provide a monster with a new face, just so it can stay alive in our imaginations? Science, when confronted with the bizarre, often delivers answers that are far more ordinary than we might hope. The mangy carcasses presented as definitive proof of the Chupacabra have been subjected to rigorous genetic testing, and the results are consistently the same. These are not new, unknown species. They are almost always coyotes, dogs, or raccoons suffering from a severe and debilitating skin condition known as sarcoptic mange. This is not a mere guess. It is a diagnosis backed by DNA evidence. The culprit is a microscopic mite, a parasite that burrows deep into the animal's skin. This infestation triggers a horrific allergic reaction. The animal's body, in a desperate and misguided attempt to fight off the invader, goes into overdrive, causing intense inflammation and crippling itching. The creature scratches and bites at itself relentlessly, tearing out its own fur in bloody clumps. Left untreated, the skin itself thickens and crusts over, becoming gray and leathery, while the animal, unable to hunt properly and racked with discomfort, becomes emaciated and weak. A healthy coyote is a familiar sight, a symbol of the wild, but a coyote in the advanced stages of mange is a walking nightmare. Its hairless, gaunt body, its thickened, alien-like skin, and its desperate, pained behavior make it look like something that has crawled out of a grave. This is the true face of the monster in so many cases. Its vampiric attacks on livestock are not the work of a supernatural predator, but the acts of a starving, diseased animal, too weak to catch its natural prey and forced to turn to easier, slower targets. The 3 puncture wounds perfectly match a canine bite, and the apparent lack of blood is a misinterpretation of natural processes after death. So the evidence points not to a legendary beast, but to a tragic, suffering creature, a victim of disease that we have transformed into a monster through our own fear and misunderstanding. If the body of the Chupacabra is, again and again, just a sick animal, then where does the terrifying legend truly reside? Science has offered its answers, yet the legend only grows stronger. We can dissect the carcasses and explain the mange, but something deep within us resists this tidy conclusion. This resistance is not a failure of logic. It is a testament to a fundamental human need, a hunger that cold, hard facts can never truly satisfy. We are drawn to the mystery itself, to the shadowy realm of the numinous, that profound and often terrifying sense of a world alive with unseen forces. A material explanation tells us what happened to the body of a goat. It does not tell us why we feel a primal chill when we hear a story about a creature in the night. The Chupacabra, like all enduring monsters, taps into something older than reason. It connects us to a time when the world was not a known quantity, but a place of wonder and danger, where every dark thicket could hide a god or a demon. This longing for a mysterious world is a spiritual impulse. In an age where satellites have mapped every inch of the globe and science has explained the rainbow, we have gained incredible knowledge, but we may have lost a certain kind of enchantment. The Chupacabra gives that enchantment back to us, even if it comes in a terrifying form. It restores a sliver of the unknown to a world that can sometimes feel too explained, too predictable. The monster represents a crack in the solid wall of our understanding, a glimpse into a reality that is stranger and more layered than our textbooks allow. To reduce it to a sick coyote is to close that crack, to dismiss the haunting questions it raises about the nature of fear, belief, and the unseen dimensions of our own existence. We do not cling to the myth because we are ignorant. We cling to it because, on some level, we need there to be monsters. We need to believe that the night still holds secrets that science has not yet named, and that the world is still capable of surprising us with its terror and its wonder. The monster escaped the cane fields and found a new home on our television screens. It became a pop culture icon, starring in low-budget horror films, appearing as a villain in sci-fi television episodes, and even battling other cryptids in popular video games. You could buy Chupacabra t-shirts, drink from a Chupacabra coffee mug, and see its snarling likeness on trading cards. This commercial journey might seem to trivialize the legend, stripping it of its original terror. Yet, in a strange and powerful way, this widespread dissemination did the exact opposite. Every movie, every game, every piece of merchandise was another act of collective belief, another layer of energy added to the creature's mythic form. It was no longer just a local Puerto Rican story, it was a global archetype, a shared digital nightmare. This process has a profound name in modern occultism: egregore. An egregore is a psychic entity, a thought form that is born from and sustained by the collective belief, focus, and emotional energy of a group. Think of a nation's flag. It is just a piece of cloth, but when millions of people pour their patriotism, their pride, and their shared history into its symbol, it becomes charged with a power that can move people to tears or to action. The flag becomes an egregore. The Chupacabra has undergone this very transformation. Through decades of media saturation and global storytelling, it has evolved from a regional folktale into a fully realized egregore, a non-physical being that now has a kind of independent existence within the collective unconscious. And this is where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Modern magical practitioners have begun to recognize the Chupacabra not as a mere monster to be feared, but as a potential tool, a source of power. In some contemporary occult circles, the Chupacabra egregore is actively invoked in rituals. A practitioner might use its image as a focus for meditation, tapping into the raw, predatory energy it represents. They are not worshiping the creature. They are utilizing the immense psychic energy that has been poured into its form by millions of minds over decades. What kind of magic would use such a being? It might be employed in workings related to protection, creating a psychic barrier that siphons negativity from an attacker, much like the creature supposedly drains its victims. It could be used in spells for shadow work, confronting the monstrous parts of the self that we normally keep hidden. The Chupacabra has become a modern god of sorts, not of love or lightning, but of fear and forbidden energy, a deity born from cable television and internet forums. Its legend is no longer just something to be believed in, it is something that can be used. So the next time you see that familiar, spiny silhouette on a t-shirt or in a movie, ask yourself a different question. You are not just looking at a cool monster design, you are looking at a battery, a reservoir of potent belief, waiting for someone with the right key to tap into its power. What would you be willing to summon with that kind of energy? The fear becomes something else entirely when you hear it in a human voice. I once spoke with an older man, a farmer from the hills outside Moravis, who asked that I not use his name. His hands, worn from a lifetime of work, trembled slightly as he lit a candle on his porch. He told me his story not for fame, but because he needed someone to understand that what he saw was real. It happened 2 years ago, long after the world had decided the Chupacabra was a myth. The night was heavy and still, he said, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. He was checking on his pregnant goat, Luz, when a smell hit him, a stench of sulfur and spoiled meat that made his eyes water. Then came the sound, a low guttural hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once, a sound that did not belong to any dog or bird or man. He turned his flashlight toward the pen, and there it was, crouched over Luz. It was not the hairless coyote from the television. This thing was built like a powerful hairless dog, but its back was arched strangely, and a line of sharp cartilage like spines ran from its neck to the base of its tail. Its skin was a mottled leathery gray in the beam of his light, but it was the eyes he cannot forget, dark and bottomless, like 2 pools of crude oil, and they held no reflection of his flashlight, no spark of life, just a flat, endless black. He froze, he told me, not from bravery, but from a primal dread that locked his joints. The creature did not snarl or startle. It simply looked up from its work, pinned him with that void-like gaze for what felt like an eternity, and then, in a movement that was unnervingly fluid, it melted back into the shadows between the trees, vanishing without a single snapped twig. He found Luz in the morning, cold and lifeless, with the 3 small puncture wounds on her neck. But for him, the true wound was not on the goat, it was in his spirit. He no longer feels safe on the land his family has tended for generations. The night is no longer a time of rest, but a watchful, anxious waiting. He told me, my friend, you can show me all the scientific papers you want. You can tell me about mange and coyotes, but you cannot tell me that the dread I felt was a disease. You cannot tell me that the thing I saw with my own eyes was a trick of the mind. For him, the Chupacabra is as real as the soil beneath his feet, a malevolent presence that stole his peace and left a chill in his soul that the sun has never been able to warm. When a man looks you in the eye and tells you a monster is real, with that much conviction, what do you say? Do you offer him facts, or do you finally begin to understand that the real terror might not be in disproving the monster, but in acknowledging the profound human truth behind the fear it creates? They come armed with night vision goggles and a desperate hope. These are the hunters of the Chupacabra, a disparate group of individuals whose quest is driven by something far deeper than a simple desire for proof. You have the weekend cryptozoologist, a plumber or a teacher from the mainland, who spends their vacation trekking through the dense undergrowth of Yunque. Their gear is often a mix of high-tech and the profoundly simple, motion-activated cameras strapped to trees alongside makeshift traps baited with raw meat. Their motivation is the thrill of the chase, the romantic idea of being the one to finally bag the creature that science denies. For them, capturing the Chupacabra is about achieving a kind of immortality, their name forever etched in the history books as the person who proved the world is stranger than we thought. Then there are the more seasoned paranormal investigators. Their approach is less about trapping a physical body and more about capturing an essence. They arrive with electromagnetic field meters, sensitive audio recorders to catch electronic voice phenomena, and infrared thermometers to find cold spots. They are not just hunting an animal, they are hunting a ghost, an interdimensional entity, a tulpa. Their methods reveal a belief that the creature operates outside normal sensory boundaries, that it might be detected by its energy signature or its whisper on the air before it is ever seen with the naked eye. Their motivation is often a blend of scientific curiosity and a deep, almost spiritual, need to validate the existence of a reality beyond our own. They seek to document the impossible, to provide a data set for the paranormal. But what unites these two groups, despite their different tools, is a shared fundamental human impulse, the need to confront the unknown directly. We are not a species that tolerates amorphous fear well. A monster you can track, record, or even shoot is a monster you can, in some way, control. The hunt is a process of domestication, an attempt to drag the terrifying specter of the unknown into the bright, manageable light of day. It is an act of courage, but also one of profound anxiety. By seeking to capture the Chupacabra, we are ultimately trying to capture our own fear, to pin it down and label it, to prove to ourselves that the thing lurking in the dark has a form we can ultimately understand and, perhaps, defeat. What does it say about us that we would rather face a monster in the jungle than the formless dread in our own minds? There is a monster we are all trying to find, a beast we project onto the world, but the most terrifying hunt always leads back to ourselves. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung offered a key to this inner mystery with his concept of the shadow. The shadow is the dark, rejected part of our own psyche, everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves, our shame, our rage, our deepest fears. We cannot bear to face these qualities in the mirror, so we subconsciously cast them out, projecting them onto an external enemy, a monster, a scapegoat. The Chupacabra fits this archetype with terrifying precision. It is not merely an animal, it is Puerto Rico's shadow given form. What has the collective psyche of the island been forced to repress? A complex history of colonial subjugation, the trauma of a people caught between identities, the simmering anger and profound grief over a lost sovereignty. These are immense, painful emotions that are difficult to process. It is far easier to create a monster in the cane fields than to stare directly at the ghost of a conquered Taino chief, or the lingering pain of a political status that feels like perpetual limbo. The creature's vampiric nature perfectly mirrors this dynamic. It is an external representation of the feeling of being drained, of having your vitality, your culture, your very essence, slowly siphoned away by an outside force you cannot see or fight. The monster becomes the container for all that unspoken historical pain. So what does it mean, then, to hunt it? The farmers with their machetes and the cryptozoologists with their cameras are not just searching for a physical beast. On a symbolic level, they are engaged in a profound act of shadow work. They are trying to confront what has been repressed, to drag the collective trauma out of the darkness and into the light of day where it can be seen, named, and ultimately, integrated. Integration is the goal of confronting the shadow. It is not about destroying the dark parts of ourselves, but about acknowledging them, understanding their power, and making that energy conscious. When a community hunts its monster, it is, in a clumsy and literal way, trying to accomplish this. To catch the Chupacabra would be to finally say, "This is our fear. This is our pain, it is real, and it is a part of us." The legend's persistence suggests this integration has not yet been fully achieved. The shadow still roams the night, because the collective psyche is not yet ready to bring it home. The real question is not whether the monster exists, but when we will finally be brave enough to stop hunting it in the jungle and instead invite it to sit at our table, to listen to the terrible stories it has come to tell. Perhaps the land itself is fighting back with the only language it has left. What if the Chupacabra is not an alien or a thought form, but something far older, a guardian spirit of the island that has been twisted into a monster? Many ancient traditions speak of the genius loci, the protective spirit of a place. These entities are tied to the land, to the rivers, the forests, and the mountains, and their well-being is directly linked to the health and respect shown to their domain. For centuries, Puerto Rico's lush landscapes were revered. The Taino honored the spirit of El Yunque, but modern times have brought concrete, pollution, and the relentless push of development that often disregards the sacredness of the natural world. When a place is poisoned, disrespected, and carved up, what happens to the spirit that calls it home? It does not simply vanish. It can become corrupted, its benevolent nature curdled by pain and rage into something vengeful. The Chupacabra's attacks are not random acts of predation. They are targeted, symbolic strikes against the very foundation of a modern, agricultural lifestyle that has, in many ways, replaced a more harmonious existence with the land. The goat and the sheep are not just animals. They represent domestication, control, and the human imposition on the wild. By draining these creatures of their lifeblood, the corrupted genius Los is performing a dark ritual of its own. It is rejecting the offering of a tamed world and demanding attention to the raw, wounded wilderness. This is not a monster hunting for food. It is the island's fever, a symptom of a deep ecological sickness manifesting as a physical warning. Every punctured goat is a cry from the poisoned soil, a scream from the deforested hillside. The creature's desiccated, alien appearance mirrors the desolation we have inflicted upon its home. It has become a hideous reflection of a damaged ecosystem. So when you hear about another sighting, ask yourself what new wound has been opened on the land. Has a forest been cleared for a new housing development? Has a river been polluted by runoff? The Chupacabra does not just suck blood. It manifests as the vengeful soul of Puerto Rico, a nature spirit gone rogue, showing us in the most terrifying way possible that the land remembers every injury and will eventually answer in kind. So we stand here at the crossroads of so many truths. Is the creature a biological mystery still hiding in the jungle, a psychic entity born from our collective mind, or a powerful symbol reflecting our deepest anxieties? The evidence pulls us in every direction. Science confidently points to the mangy coyote, a tragic animal whose suffering we have misinterpreted. Yet that explanation feels strangely hollow to the farmer who smelled sulfur and stared into bottomless black eyes. Folklore insists it is a modern maboya, a shape-shifting spirit of misfortune for a new age. The esoteric traditions suggest a tulpa, a being given life by decades of fear and fascination. And the conspiracy theorist sees a government-made horror, a literal manifestation of political powerlessness. Each lens offers a piece of the puzzle, but none captures the entire, shimmering picture. Perhaps the most profound truth is that the Chupacabra is all of these things simultaneously. It is a sick coyote and a summoned demon, a media star, and a colonial ghost. Its power lies in its refusal to be pinned down to a single category. It exists in the liminal space between fact and fiction, between the physical world and the world of spirit. This ambiguity is its essence, so the question is not which answer is correct. The real question, the one that matters on a spiritual level, is which truth do you need it to be? Does your soul resonate more with the idea of a world still wild enough to hide undiscovered animals, or with the terrifying power of the human mind to manifest its own demons? Does it speak to you of ancient lands crying out in pain, or of a collective shadow finally demanding to be seen? Your answer to that question reveals less about the monster, and more about the nature of your own fears, your own longing for mystery, and your own personal map of the unseen world. The Chupacabra is a mirror, and what you see staring back at you from its glowing red eyes is a part of yourself you have yet to fully understand. The hunt for the Chupacabra has never been about finding a body. It is a search for something far more elusive, a quest to understand the very nature of belief itself. We have followed its trail from the blood-drained farms of Puerto Rico to the laboratories of science, from the ancient whispers of folklore to the digital realms of modern magic. Every path we have taken reveals a different facet of the same dazzling mystery. It is a sick coyote, a psychic vampire, a political symbol, and a vengeful spirit of the land all at once. The creature's true power does not come from its fangs or its claws, but from its profound ambiguity, its refusal to be defined. It lives in the liminal space between what we know and what we fear, a permanent resident of the shadowy borderlands of our collective mind. This legend endures because it answers a deep human need for a world that is still wild, still mysterious, and still capable of surprising us with its terror. The evidence may point to mange, but our souls point to the monster. So now, the most important question comes to you. After this journey through the many faces of the goat sucker, what do you believe it truly is? Is it an undiscovered animal, a thought form made real, a symbol of collective trauma, or something else entirely? Your perspective is the next piece of this puzzle. Share your own theory, your own story, or your own encounter in the comments below. Let's continue this exploration together, because the final chapter of this mystery is not written in a book or sealed in a lab. It is being written right now, in the shared imagination of everyone who dares to wonder what else might be lurking